My father tried so hard to protect me that he almost destroyed me. When my mother passed away, I thought the world had ended, not only because she was my mother, my safe haven, but because overnight everything went silent. And my father, he disappeared too, even though he was always there. He changed. He started treating me like I was made of glass. At first I understood. I thought it was grief, that it would pass. But over time, it became clear it wasn't just sadness. It was fear. A fear that completely overwhelmed him. He started wanting to know where I was every minute, calling me several times a day, asking who I was with, what I was eating, if I was going to be long. If I was even 5 minutes too late, he'd text me. At first, it was just annoying. Then it became suffocating. I couldn't breathe. And at the same time, I felt guilty for being angry because I knew he loved me. I just didn't know how to deal with the pain anymore. There were days when he'd wait up late for me just to make sure I'd arrived safely. If I said I was going to a friend's house, he'd ask my name, the address, who else would be there. Sometimes he'd even drop me off and pick me up. I felt like a teenager again, even though I was 22 and working. He had the best intentions, I know that now, but at the time all I saw was someone trying to control my life. I'd already lost my mother, and I felt like I was losing my freedom too. It was as if he'd gone into automatic protection mode, and I was the last thing he could protect. I tried to talk, but he always responded with, "It's for your own good," or "You don't understand now, but one day you will." And that hurt, because I wanted to grow up. I wanted to live. But I felt like for him, if I grew up too much, I'd leave, and he couldn't stand that. I started hiding things, little lies to get some air. I'd say I was going to work, but I was going to have coffee with a friend, or I'd say I'd be home at 8 p.m., knowing I'd be home at 9 p.m., just so he wouldn't freak out if I was late. But it was eating me up inside. I didn't want to live hiding who I was or what I did. And more than that, I felt like I was losing my father. He didn't smile like he used to. He didn't watch his favorite shows. He stopped playing the guitar, something that was a part of him. It was as if he'd locked himself inside the pain. And there I was, trying to live, but feeling guilty about it. The guilt was constant, for wanting to get out, for wanting to love, for wanting to be free. It was as if to respect his pain, I had to put myself aside. But there came a time when I realized, if we continued like this, neither of us would be able to move on. The turning point happened on an ordinary day, the kind you never expect to change anything. It was Sunday, and he was going through old family albums. I sat on the floor next to him. We flipped through the photos in silence. Then he picked up one of me, about 10 years old, smiling next to my mom. He looked at me and said, "You were so happy. I wish I could protect you from the world so you could stay that way." That made my throat tighten, and for the first time I truly responded. I said, "Dad, I'm still that girl, but now I need to live my life my way, and you won't be able to protect me from everything, but you can support me. That gives me strength." He was quiet for a while. Then he closed the album and went to the kitchen. I thought I'd said too much, but that night he didn't call me asking where I was, and that was a beginning. Little by little, I tried to show him that I was ready, that I could handle myself. I started sharing my daily life with him, not to ask permission, but to include him. I told him about my achievements at work, the decisions I was making on my own, the friends I was meeting. At first, he listened with that worried look on his face, but said nothing. Then he started offering his opinions. And even if some were unnecessary, it was his way of trying to reconnect. I understood that he was trying too, that he was relearning how to be the father of a grown woman. And it wasn't easy, neither for me nor for him, because he still saw the 10-year-old girl who ran to bed when she had nightmares. But now I was leading my own life, and he was learning to see me that way. One night I came home late, after a happy hour with the people from work. I walked in a little wary, expecting a scolding or a lecture, but he just asked if I'd had fun. I said yes, and he replied, "I'm happy for you." Sounds simple, right? But I almost cried at that sentence, because it was the first time he didn't react with fear, but with support. We sat down to eat the rest of the pizza from the fridge, and for the first time in a long time, the conversation flowed smoothly. No tension, no pressure. I realized my dad was coming back, little by little, and that part of it was because I hadn't given up on him. Because, even though I was suffocated at times, I understood he wasn't a villain. He was just a man with a broken heart, trying not to lose what was left. And deep down, he was as human as I was. A few months later, I got a promotion at work. It was one of the most important days of my life, and I decided to tell him before telling anyone else. He was so moved, his eyes filled with tears. He hugged me tightly and said, "Your mother would be so proud." That broke me. And in that hug, I felt like we were healing some of the pain that had lingered between us, not completely, but enough to move on. From that day on, he began to trust me more. He started asking less, "Where are you going?" and more, "How was your day?" It seemed like little, but it was a lot, because he finally saw me as someone capable, and that made me want to grow even more, to show him and myself that I could live independently without ceasing to be a daughter. It was around this time that he met Donna Elisa, a nice lady who frequented the same hiking group he'd joined. I never imagined my father would be interested in anyone again. I even thought he'd never open up to it again, but little by little, he started mentioning her name here and there. He'd say she laughed at his jokes, that they both had similar tastes in old music. I paid attention, but didn't push it. I let him talk at his own pace. One day, he asked me to help him pick out a shirt because he was going out with her. I almost laughed, but held back, because there he was, allowing himself to be seen again. And I felt so light inside, because for so long I thought he'd be stuck in pain forever. But there he was, with a sparkle in his eyes. And I saw that he too was moving on. Their relationship grew slowly, unhurriedly, but you could tell he was happy. He started playing the guitar again. He started leaving the house more. His smile returned. And me, I was living my life more peacefully, knowing that, even with all the heavy past, we had managed to turn the page. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. There was a lot of crying, a lot of difficult conversations. But we chose not to give up on each other. I learned that sometimes love means knowing how to set boundaries. And that family isn't about sticking together, but about supporting each other. Today, my father and Elisa are still together. He's even planning a trip with her. And me, I keep growing, falling, getting back up. But now, with the certainty that he's rooting for me, and that changes everything. The most symbolic day of all was when I moved out on my own. I packed my things, rented a little space of my own, and made sure to invite him over to see it. He arrived with a somewhat lost look on his face, looking at everything as if it were a museum. But when he walked into the kitchen and saw that I had even hung up my mother's dish towels, he smiled. He hugged me and said, "You did it." And I replied, "We did it." Because, in the end, that's exactly what happened. We managed to overcome the pain, the fear, the insecurity, and reach a place of peace. He taught me so much, even without realizing it, and I had to grow up faster than I wanted. But today, looking back, I can see that every step was worth it, that even in the midst of chaos, we can build love again. Healthy love. Love that liberates. I won't lie, living alone gave me butterflies at first. The first night in the apartment was incredibly quiet. There was no loud television, no questions about where I was, no messages every half hour. It was just me, my scattered boxes, and a slightly cold cup of tea. But little by little, that silence became companionship. I began to enjoy listening to my own thoughts, choosing what to watch, what to eat, when to sleep. For the first time, I was living for myself. Not to please, not to alleviate anyone's fears, just for myself. My father would come visit sometimes, and at first he would watch everything too closely. But then he relaxed. He would sit on the couch, tell me his news, and listen to mine, without control, without tension. I knew he was still afraid, but it was a fear he was learning to live with, and not let it control everything. My relationship with him changed, lighter, more genuine. We stopped fighting over trivial matters. We stopped going around in circles in arguments that led nowhere. He still gave me advice I didn't ask for, of course. But now I listened with affection, because it came from a different place. It wasn't control anymore. It was care, and I learned to receive that care without feeling suffocated. We needed to rebuild ourselves as father and daughter. And to do that, we had to open up some wounds, have difficult conversations, face trauma head-on, but it was worth it. Because today we talk like two adults, and the most beautiful thing of all is that even with the distance, we've grown closer. I think this happens when love frees itself from fear, when we learn to truly trust, not just because we love, but because we respect each other's space. There was a moment that really struck me. One weekend I spent at his house. Donna Elisa had made a cornmeal cake, and he picked me up from the subway. Over coffee, he spoke so calmly about how happy he was with the life he was leading. He said he never imagined he'd love someone again, or even that he'd be able to see me leave the nest without falling apart. And then he said, "You taught me courage, daughter. I was afraid of everything. Of loss, of being alone, of seeing you leave, but you showed me that love is also letting go." At the time, I could only smile and hold his hand, because there, in that simple moment, we were sealing something much bigger, a cycle that had been difficult, painful, but which now closed with maturity and peace. Of course, there are still days when memories hurt. When I hear my mother's voice in a song, or see one of her recipes in an old notebook, it's a wrenching, feeling, but now it's different. It's no longer paralyzing. It's a longing that has become part of me, not a prison. And I think my father feels it too. He still keeps a photo of her in his wallet and speaks of her fondly, no longer with heaviness. Donna Elisa understands this, and I think that's why he was able to move on. Because she didn't try to erase his story, she just entered with a light touch. And I learned a lot from observing this more mature, calmer love. I learned that you can start over at 50, at 60, at any age, that our hearts don't have an expiration date, and that, with patience and care, we can mend even the most torn pieces of our soul. Sometimes I tell this story to my friends, and I see that many people don't understand what it's like to have to teach someone to let go. It's hard to explain, but it's a common reality. There are parents who, out of love, try to control. They try so hard to protect that they end up hurting. And there are children who, for fear of hurting, deny themselves. But there comes a time when we have to choose whether we want to live a small life to please, or whether we want to take risks and show that it's possible to grow without truly distancing ourselves. And that's what I did. With affection, with respect, with patience. Today, my father admires me, and I admire him, because he had the humility to learn, to change. That's greatness. And if there's one thing I take away from this whole experience, it's that pain can unite or drive us apart. In our case, after much effort, it united us. I always thought overcoming was a grand thing, like beating an illness, escaping an accident, or radically changing your life. But I've learned that overcoming also lies in the details, in saying no firmly, in leaving the house without guilt, in sleeping peacefully, knowing you're the master of your own story. My greatest victory was building this freedom without losing my father along the way, because that was what I feared most, that by freeing myself, I would hurt him to the point of losing our bond. But the opposite happened. The more I showed I could walk alone, the more proud he became. And that gave me even more strength. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who didn't run away from pain, but also didn't let it swallow them. I hit rock bottom, but I came back, and I brought my father with me. The house where I grew up is different now, quieter, tidier. My bedroom has become an office, and my bed was donated. When I go there, I feel like a visitor, but in the best sense. No longer that trapped daughter, but a grown woman who has made her own path and returns to rediscover her roots. My father treats me with respect. He listens to me. Sometimes he even asks me for advice. And that's beautiful because it shows that the relationship has become balanced. It's no longer top-down. It's side by side. We've matured together. He relearned to love without fear, and I learned to love freely. This doesn't erase what we've been through, but it transforms. And this transformation is what gives me peace, because I know that despite everything, we did the best with what we had. Today, living my own life, with my own plans and responsibilities, I look back and see a journey of learning. There were years of pain, of silent conflicts, of swallowed tears, but they were also years of construction, of true affection, of consciously choosing healthy love. Not everyone achieves this. Some people lose themselves, who break completely. I was lucky, and I also had courage, because I had to stand up for myself, insist, believe it was possible. And so did he. My father was also brave in admitting he needed to change, in recognizing he could no longer live the way he was. He could have closed himself off even more. He could have distanced himself. But he chose to walk with me, and that choice made all the difference. Many people say that time heals everything. I don't think time heals. I think time gives us space for us to look again calmly with different eyes. But what really heals is the will to transform. It's the daily effort, the difficult conversation, the gesture of humility. That's what healed us. It wasn't time. It was the choices, small daily choices. And this taught me to look at all my relationships with more empathy, to understand that no one is perfect, that everyone carries their ghosts, but that, with respect and dialogue, it's possible to build something good, something light, something worthwhile. That's what I did with my father, and that's what I try to do with all the people I love. If I could say one thing to anyone going through something similar, it would be, don't give up. But also, don't give up. It's possible to show that you're strong without cutting ties. You can be free and continue being a daughter, granddaughter, sister, partner. It's difficult, of course. It requires patience, conversation, courage, but it's possible. And when it works, it's beautiful, because there's nothing more rewarding than seeing someone who loves you learn to love you the right way that strengthens you, not imprisons you. My father loves me, he always has, but today he loves me with a lightness. And that makes all the difference. We chose each other again, and I'm grateful for that every day. The first time my father called me a strong woman was when I decided to invest in my own project, a small online handmade stationery store. I trembled with fear, thinking he would criticize or say it wasn't safe, but he simply replied, "If anyone can make this work, it's you." I froze, because it was the kind of thing he wouldn't have been able to say years ago. He only knew how to protect, not support. And now he was there, recognizing my strength, not as a daughter, but as a woman, as a professional, as someone capable. That changed everything. It was then that I understood that his trust in me had already shifted, that it was no longer control disguised as zeal. It was true faith in who I had become. This gave me even more courage to grow, to expand, to continue believing in my dreams. And more, it made me proud to know that he was a part of it, even with the setbacks. Over time, I began to see my father as a man, not just as a father. And this helped me forgive a lot. Because when we're children, we see our parents as superheroes, invincible. But they're just people trying to cope with life the way they know how. My father lost the love of his life and was afraid of losing the rest of them too. And fear is treacherous. It can make even the best of us become shadows of what we once were. When I understood this, it became easier to let go of the hurt. I haven't forgotten the difficult times, nor do I pretend everything was easy. But today, I choose to look forward. I choose to see what he learned, the man he's become. And he sees me that way too. No longer as the girl he needed to save, but as the woman he respects and admires. We've changed together, and this is a victory for us. Donna Elisa became part of the family. At first, I was apprehensive, of course. I didn't want her to take my mother's place, but she never tried. She came in slowly, with affection, with respect, and she won my father over with patience. Sometimes, I see them laughing together, sharing coffee, making plans, and my heart fills with relief. Because for a long time, I thought my father would never truly smile again. Today, he has joy in his eyes. He plans trips, tends the plants in the backyard, sings while washing the dishes. And part of that is because of her, and part of it is because of himself, who allowed himself to start over. This taught me that love can arrive again, even when we think we've already experienced everything, and that when it arrives lightly, it heals, it transforms, it soothes. I am grateful that she entered our story with such tact and such truth. I know my mother will always be a strong presence in our lives. Some days my father still talks about her with tears in his eyes, but now he also talks about Elisa with a sparkle in his eyes. And I think that's beautiful, because loving someone new doesn't erase the past. It just shows that our hearts can expand. We don't have to choose between one or the other. He carries my mother in his chest and holds Elisa's hand lovingly. That's emotional maturity. That's courage. And seeing this happen helped me rethink many things in my own love life. I stopped seeking security and control. I started seeking partnership, respect, space, and that changed the way I relate to everyone. When we see healthy love up close, we understand what we deserve. And I was lucky enough to witness this rebirth in my father. It inspired me to live a lighter life too. Recently, he gave me a letter he wrote to me. It said that, for a long time, he was afraid of losing me, not because of an accident or illness, but because he didn't know how to let me grow. He acknowledged that he overreacted, that he tried to hold me back when he should have encouraged me, and he ended by saying, "You taught me what it means to love freely. Thank you for not giving up on me." I cried reading it. Not because I didn't know he loved me, but because it was the first time he admitted he'd made a mistake, that he was afraid, that he learned. This sealed our new phase, a father and daughter who made mistakes, tried, talked, and rebuilt themselves. And I was even more proud of everything we've experienced, because our story, with all its flaws, is also a story of love, of the kind of love that doesn't give up, that transforms. There are days when I look at him and see a man reborn, not just because he loved again, but because he chose to live differently. He chose to trust, to let go, to let life flow, and that's ageless. He could have remained trapped in fear forever. He could have pushed everyone away, but he chose to evolve. He chose to relearn, and I learned from him that it's never too late to change, that we can rebuild bridges even after a long time of silence or pain. This gave me hope in all my relationships. It taught me that it's worth talking, trying, and persisting when there's true love. Today, my father is an example to me, not because he's perfect, but because he's real. A man who had the courage to change for love, and who taught me, even without knowing it, to be free and whole. The other day we had lunch together, and he asked me, "Are you happy, daughter?" I stopped to think. I looked at my life, at my little corner, at the work I love, at the friendships I've built, at the path I've taken to get here, and I answered, "I am, very much so." He smiled, lowered his head, and said, "Then it was all worth it." I felt a lump in my throat, because in that moment I understood that this was his dream too, that everything he'd tried to do, even clumsily, was to see me happy. And now, finally, he was seeing it. Not the way he'd imagined, not with all the strings attached, but with lightness, with truth. And that, in the end, is what matters, that we managed to weather the storm and find peace. Today, if someone asks me about my greatest overcoming, I don't talk about a trauma or a material achievement. I talk about this journey with my father, because that's what overcoming is, transforming pain into learning. It's embracing fear and turning it into momentum. It's learning to love without controlling, to respect without suffocating, and to live freely without losing our connection. We did it, with mistakes, with stumbles, but with so much love. And this story is what strengthens me on difficult days, because it reminds me that it's possible, that even when it seems impossible, it still happens, that all it takes is two people willing to change, and anything can happen. I wish more parents and children had this chance, to see each other as people, not just as roles, to truly listen to each other without fear or pride, to grow together even after so many missed opportunities. I know not everyone will be as lucky as I was, but if anyone is reading this and thinking about giving up, I just want to say, try one more time, maybe with a letter, with a calm conversation, one step at a time, because sometimes behind so much fear, there's so much love waiting to be experienced in a better way. And when that happens, it's liberating. It heals both sides. This is my story, that of a daughter who nearly suffocated with overprotection, but who didn't give up on teaching her own father to let her fly. That of a father who nearly lost himself in fear, but who had the courage to change for love. That of two human beings who, amidst pain, chose to move on, to grow, to love. And that for me is overcoming. It's not forgetting the past. It's making peace with it and using it as a foundation for something new. I'm happy, he's happy, and we're free, together. And if I can leave one final message, it's this: love, when it's true, doesn't hold you back. It teaches you to fly. And when we fly and look back and see who encouraged us with their feet firmly on the ground, that's when we understand it was all worth it.